Hey there, and welcome back to County Talk. I'm Sue Hansen. I'm one of your 3 elected county commissioners. And as you know, this is the time where we delve a little bit deeper into kind of what's going on at the county, things we do that you may not know we do, experts that we have in our employee field. So today we're going to talk about a very serious topic, and that is fentanyl. And I have Greg Hill, who's our investigator with Montrose County Human Services, here to talk about it, former drug force task member, and so an expert in this area. And we thought it would be useful to sit down and talk about what is fentanyl, how did we get here, what kind of a problem it is, and so we want to talk a little bit about all of that today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I
Glad
appreciate
you could
it.
be here. So why don't we give us a little brief introduction of you, your background, and kind of what brought you to this position.
Sure. Yeah. So right now I'm a fraud investigator for Human Services. So a lot of what I do is investigate food stamp fraud, Medicaid fraud, a lot of the taxpayer-funded programs. I look into that to make sure that information provided by clients is accurate and up to date. Prior to that, I spent 10 years with the sheriff's office here in Montrose, and I spent 6 of those 10 years working narcotics. So that gave me a real deep dive into some of the issues within the community, that some that aren't being addressed, education purposes to where the kids and parents, I don't feel like are have a full understanding of the dangers of some of the drugs out there. So I'm fortunate enough that my current boss still allows me to be involved in some of that stuff, and I can still have training and stay on top of it, at least some of the drug trends. So if the opportunity presents itself, I can educate some people if they'd like that.
I do know it's kind of a passion of yours that education, so people understand what the dangers are, because not everybody is paying attention to that. A lot of parents don't understand the danger of fentanyl. But let's start at the beginning. What is fentanyl,
Sure.
and why should we be concerned?
Yeah. So we'll probably have to. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. You know what I mean? So it's it's been around for several years, but without going back and looking at Amendment 64, so November of 2012, Colorado allows recreational marijuana, open marijuana shops and whatever else, which I can tell you when I was on patrol, I'd rather deal with somebody who was under the influence of marijuana than somebody who was drinking tequila all night long. You know what I mean? So there's some pros and cons that come along with that. But I think with every action or every law that kind of gets passed that says, hey, listen, you can partake in some of these things, there's the black market that's also going to follow that. So what you kind of saw.
So let me just back up,
sure.
because Colorado lessened the sentencing criteria for some of these hard drugs, cocaine, fentanyl, or opioids, methamphetamine.
Yeah.
And so it became a misdemeanor. Is that my understanding?
Correct. Yeah. So that was in. I want to say in 2020, and we can kind of hit on this as we go along, but there were new drug laws in 2020 that basically said if you possessed anything lower than 4 grams of heroin or methamphetamine, then it was a drug misdemeanor.
So let's talk, translation. A gram is about how much?
A gram would be 1 packet of Sweet and Low. So,
okay.
So about 4 packets of Sweet and Low would total your 4 grams right there. The thing with heroin, when you start getting to the opioid side of things, is heroin is sold by the point. Mm-hmm. So essentially it's sold by the 1/10 of a gram. Mm-hmm. So the state basically said it's okay for you to possess up to 40 doses of heroin and not collect a felony charge. And again, I'm not here to say anybody needs to be charged with felonies. But when you see that and what you saw at the street level, you saw property crime go up. Mm-hmm. Because in large part what happens is if there was a traffic stop, if you had possession of 2.5 grams of meth, you would get a citation or a ticket.
Okay.
Law enforcement would remove that. You weren't going to jail at that time. So a lot of the times, the addiction would take over, and you start, if your generator's not bolted to the ground or if your vehicle's unlocked. So you see a lot of the property crime started to tick up a little bit with some of those drug laws.
When we decriminalize things, right? It gives people permission. I just want to back up a little bit and talk opioids. If anybody's had a knee surgery or a hip surgery or something like that, or any kind of surgery where you need pain meds, often you're prescribed an opioid.
Correct.
And it would be called Percocet or
Vicodin,
Oxycontin.
some of those, yeah.
And so those are the common names that we always think about. But fentanyl is basically just the synthetic of one of those.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
So the properties of fentanyl, highly addictive.
Extremely. It's 80 to 100 times more addictive than morphine.
Right. And
Yeah.
so there was originally, we started talking about opioids back in, you might remember, I know you do, you might remember, the opioid crisis. We talked about it a lot. And what we found is that there were some overprescribing situations. This is mostly on the East Coast and in West Virginia, some areas like that where there are some real abuses with this because it is so highly addictive, right? And so that kind of it leads us to where we are today with the Opioid Council and all the things that we're trying to do to help people. But I want people to understand that the highly addictive nature of opioids and how even people like you or I, if we were in deep pain, you could find yourself becoming addicted to it.
Well, yeah, and that's a great question. So it only takes 5 days for your body to develop a need for that. You know what I mean? So I think back to where I had wisdom teeth removed, years ago, and my prescription was Vicodin, and I think I had it may have been a week or two's worth, but even something as simple as getting your wisdom teeth removed, it doesn't have to be a major surgery, a back injury or knee injury.
Yeah, that's true.
It could, and it only takes 5 days for your body to need that. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is, hey, I got a prescription, I can use this. That's going to come to an end.
Yeah.
And that's, again, like you said, the opioid epidemic that we kind of saw is we saw a huge uptick in heroin use right around the time. Right, I should say around COVID. A huge uptick in heroin, and heroin hadn't been around for a while. So we started seeing that, and then in come the fentanyl started being sprinkled in a little bit, and now it's almost the opposite. You have a lot more fentanyl, very little heroin.
So why would you want to sprinkle in fentanyl? I mean, is it because it's more addictive than heroin?
Yeah, because it's more addictive.
Okay.
And it's it doesn't take much. Kind of some of the odd things in the drug world are, if somebody passed away to a drug overdose, people want to know where that drug came from so they can go get it, as opposed to being like, we don't want any part of that because it's the good stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? So those were some of the things that I saw that kind of made me realize, wow, I have a lot of training. I have a lot to learn about the street level stuff. So, so yeah, it's just to see how it's kind of graduated and being sprinkled into methamphetamine. Like I said, heroin was there for a while. I still have a couple of buddies that still do that kind of work, and spoke to them last week, and they said now there's a big uptick in powder fentanyl. So it's just a gradual effect of different, all the same substance, just different times that things are coming out to where people may feel like, oh, this is better.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still all one and the same. It's still all fentanyl, regardless of how it's ingested.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that even with the advertisements you see on television about drugs and things like that, there's still that tendency to want to try it, and I think kids are curious. So that's a particular concern of yours. I know you've done some training in the schools. What does a typical fentanyl tablet, what does it look like?
And I have some photographs, but anymore they're kind of getting. It's almost like they're pandering to children. So that when they first came out, they were known as blues or
kind of a light blue.
Yeah, kind of a light blue, almost like a replica of an Oxycontin, right? So now they're being sprinkled. They're using like Tesla logos. They'll use Louis Vuitton logos. They'll again, it's all still the same thing. Maybe looking kind of rainbowish. Regardless of what it is, it's all the same substance. So it's and that's back to you said with experimentation. That's the scary thing about it is, if you experiment with fentanyl, there's a very high likelihood that could be the last time you experiment with anything because it is so potent.
Right, and they're not. I mean, this is not like. So we've moved from prescription, opioids, which are highly regulated by the FDA, right?
Yeah.
But we're talking about drugs that are not. And so when you put yourself in danger, when you risk using something or being curious, you really have to know what's going on because you don't know how much fentanyl could be in that tablet.
Correct.
And so it could cause an overdose.
Absolutely. Well, and it's so for you and I, as somebody who doesn't have a tolerance for that substance, 2 milligrams is enough is a lethal dose. And to kind of put that into perspective, there's 1,000 milligrams in a packet of Sweet and Low. 2 milligrams is enough to kill you.
Right. So that in and of itself just freaks me out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge.
Right.
So I mean, so what's the demographic are we concerned about that is? I mean, let's separate the prescription because my husband just had knee surgery, and just knowing what I know about opioids. And we're heightenedly aware. You have a prescription for pain. You're going to have some pain, but it was like, when can we wean you off of this? Because you didn't want to become to that point.
Right.
But not everybody does that. People default to I don't want to be in any pain at all.
Correct.
What demographic is using what are the demographics with regard to fentanyl specifically? But we're talking about drugs overall.
Right. And that's kind of the thing with drugs is it doesn't really. It's for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate part about it is I can tell you that when heroin became real big, and like I said, that was kind of around COVID, right before COVID or during COVID times, we saw a huge uptick in heroin overdoses. A lot of them that resulted in death, unfortunately.
Because why? Why during COVID? People didn't have anything to do?
I think it was part of that. It was new because heroin hadn't been a thing for a while. So I think a lot of people saw that as an opportunity, like you said, to relieve some pain. But the demographic we saw late teens to mid 60s, late 60s, it doesn't really, the drugs don't care.
Group.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
The drugs don't care. The distributors don't care. At the end of the day, it's a business,
A very big
an unfortunate business, a huge business.
Yeah. Let me shift because I think you know a lot about this too. Where is fentanyl manufactured? How does it get in our country? I mean, because what used to be, I mean, the old days it was meth labs, right?
Sure.
They were doing and we had them in Montrose, Delta County. We had them all over the Western Slope, right?
Right.
But it shifted because the drugs became so available and cheap, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about where they come from and how it gets here. And
Absolutely. And, to kind of hit on your point with the methamphetamine, towards the last couple of years when I was still in that work, we didn't get any methamphetamine that was below 98% purity. You know what I mean? So it's very, very clean. The U.S. restricts the amount of Sudafed that you can purchase, which is a main ingredient that goes into that. So a lot of those precursors, a lot of the ingredients that go into both fentanyl and methamphetamine come from China to Mexico. In Mexico, they have super labs where they're producing methamphetamine by 55-gallon buckets. You know what I mean? I mean, there's just a ton of it.
Huge business. So much money in it.
Exactly. And doing this kind of work, you have to appreciate the business side of that, where you can lose tons and tons of product and it doesn't affect your overall day-to-day. They understand, when I say cartels understand that they're going to lose some product. But like I said, at the end of the day,
it's the cost of doing business.
It's a cost of doing business, and you have to have a little bit of appreciation for that because not that what they're doing is great, but the business mindset to where you have that much clientele and you can lose that much product at any given time and still be successful. Again, you have to respect that, but it's also very scary. It tells you how much the market has flooded with that. So like I said, meth was and is still big time, but everything is being produced in Mexico, and it comes over the border. The closer to the border, the cheaper it is.
Right.
Farther north it gets, the more expensive it gets, and the farther east it gets, the more expensive it is.
Do you ever think we'll get rid of drug use like this? I mean, is it possible? Because I remember I was talking to law enforcement when I first was elected, and I'm like, let's just put a barrier up at 50 and let's just stop people from coming in if they look shady.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you stop it. And I mean,
I don't know that you're ever going to stop it. It's just one of those things. One of the statistics that I like to refer to is 80% of the world's pill usage is done here in the United States. And a large part of that is because we we, the United States, have the money to purchase, and a lot of it's being produced in Mexico. So to answer your question, I don't know that you're ever going to stop that. I would say there probably needs to be some stricter punishments for that. And again, going back to when they changed the drug laws in 2020, they didn't provide people an opportunity to clean up either. So they allowed the opportunity to not go to jail and be able to possess under 4 grams. But if somebody decided, and I think of the West End, if somebody wakes up one day and they've been involved in this for a long time, where do they go to get help? So that's a thing for me that I would love to see the state say, hey, listen, we have defelonized simple possession of heroin, methamphetamine, a lot of these drugs. But if people want to get help, where do they go? So I think that's one thing that the state can do better.
And we'll talk about that in a minute, because I want to
Sure.
make sure that we end with information for people if they want to seek more information. But do you think that the message by decriminalizing these, what I consider pretty significant drugs, and even marijuana, is that message, what is the message that sends to our youth? And I'm concerned about that, because it's permissible.
Yeah.
It's, all over. And so that laissez-faire approach to a substance that could be ultimately dangerous to you is bothersome to me. So I wonder if the state of Colorado has kind of made a mistake.
Yeah. And I would hope that they're looking at that because, again, I do these presentations all the time, and there are times I've talked to parents, and parents have said, well, I don't know that my child is using, but they have mentioned so-and-so does use and nothing has happened to them, which is an awful mindset to have, right?
Yeah.
Because it only takes one time.
Right.
So I think the state, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus,
No.
but I think they can do. I think we can do better as far as people that want to get out of that.
Well, it's the voters.
Education,
It's not the state,
Sure.
right? The voters.
Sure.
And I this is why I think these kind of discussions are so important, so
Yeah.
people really understand the overall danger of it. I would worry if I had kids in school. I would worry that they would mistakenly be curious. Kids are curious.
Absolutely right.
And then pretty soon they're just, I'll try it, and that's worrisome for me.
Right.
But where do people go when they need help? I mean, so let's just assume that somebody finds themselves. How do we lead them to help? And I know we've done a lot of work with the Opioid Council and that sort of thing, but how can we help?
I know River Valley and Access, they have walk-in opportunities for people to go in and get some counseling, get a little bit of help. So I think those are 2 really good resources that we have. As far as an actual inpatient, it's hard to find.
Right.
Grand Junction had one, and I know it's kind of up in the air right now. But as far as I know, the closest inpatient that you can get to may be Fort Collins, and that's, again, we can do better.
Right.
There needs to be something closer.
Right.
I give credit to ATC, although it's you don't get in that program without violating
Creating it.
laws, you know
Right.
what I mean? But at the same time, they have their success rate is above 70%, and they do such great things to get people back on their feet, build confidence. So if we could have something similar to that you didn't have to go through the judicial system to get to that,
Right.
that would be beneficial. But
Right.
how we get there,
Yeah,
I don't
I don't know the answer to that. I just think
Right.
we have to keep chipping it away. I know that recovery programs tend to work.
Yeah.
The peer recovery, where you have someone who really can walk you through these processes and what happens, is important. But I want you to talk just a little bit about your presentations to the school, particularly in the West End. You went over there and you did a presentation. You were surprised that kids were not as familiar as you thought they might be.
Right.
So just talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, whenever I do the presentations for the kids, I keep it about 30 minutes and allow 30 minutes for questions. And boy, they ask some real questions, and it seems to me that a lot of the questions they're asking is they're trying to put some pieces together, whether they've seen something, whether they've heard something, and they're just really curious, So let that curiosity come to people that can instruct and teach, as opposed to the curiosity going to experimentation.
Right.
So that part of it is I appreciate a lot. And again, some of the questions that these kids come up with, and it's really 6th, 7th, 8th graders, that are trying to figure some things out. And like I said,
Sort of in that vulnerable stage too, where
Exactly.
you have peer pressure kind of raining on you,
Yep,
and
Yep, exactly right. So I feel like And I've heard some good things from the West End, but I hope that the information provided maybe put some of them at ease, or can maybe identify some things without experimenting or without relying on their 7th grade friend to say, oh, this is what's going on, when, again, the drugs are changing all the time. And it's tough for parents to keep up with that.
Yeah.
It's tough for parents to identify, symptoms of what it might look like. So.
Do you think parents have enough information? Do you think
No,
that,
no, I don't think so. No, I think there's. Again, it just changes so much.
Well,
you know
and
what
maybe
I
there's
mean?
some denial too. Not surely you said, or you kind of touched on it. Not, oh surely my kid's not doing that.
Sure.
Same
Yeah.
with like vaping. They have that
Yeah,
commercial.
I'm
No,
sure
I don't think
there's
he's.
parts of that.
Yeah.
But again, I think as a parent, you have to establish a normal. What's the norm for your child? I did a presentation not long ago, and we were talking about teenagers, and some of the examples I give is, if your kids are sleeping till noon, or if they're, staying out late and they're not being themselves, and somebody said, well, that's just my teenager. And I said, well, if that's their normal, okay, understand that's their normal, and figure out what's going on outside of that. Are they asking for $25 every day? Where's that money going?
So you're teaching them to identify behavioral changes in their demeanor, for
Correct.
instance.
Yep.
Is there some looks? I mean, how would I identify somebody who'd been using?
Yeah, so it's going to be a pretty stark difference between methamphetamine use and opioid use.
Okay.
With opioid use, things tend to slow down quite a bit. So if you're a parent and you're trying to talk to your kid and it feels like they're not comprehending what you're saying, or it's taking them a long time to respond to you, or they don't have clear eyes, they're not making a lot of sense, there's a possibility that fentanyl or another opiate could be on board. Now, if you talk about methamphetamine, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah, that's
it's
more of a
constant movement.
stimulant.
Yeah, stimulant, exactly. So there's constant movement. Again, a lot of what's being talked about may not make sense, but you're not going to get it mistaken for fentanyl use, because fentanyl use really slows you down,
Right.
and the methamphetamine bumps you up.
So what we really want parents to do is pay attention.
Correct.
Right. I mean, be aware, be present,
Be
pay
involved.
attention to your
Yeah.
kids, be involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure you know what they're doing, and I think also be ready to answer any of the questions they have. I mean,
Correct.
I'm concerned that we could do better in our education, probably in our schools. I don't know what they're doing at this point, but I know that the presentation you've done in schools, the kids, it made an impact with kids. They were curious. They were asking questions. Oh, that's what it looks like, and even saying, as you alluded to, I have a friend or someone in our family. I think I suspect them of doing things, and so I mean, they've got to be scared. Right. I mean, they're frightened.
I would, and that's the thing is, I really hope that parents are doing some research. You know what I mean? Because it's not the days of marijuana that was coming across the border from Mexico that had a bunch of stems and seeds that wasn't great.
Yeah, like in the '60s. You're
Yeah,
talking about.
exactly.
You weren't
Or even
alive
when I was
the
in high
60s.
school.
Were you in high-
Same. Well,
Yeah.
80s, 90s.
Just like everything else, the sophistication of manufacturing drugs has gotten so
Correct.
So again, if you're a baby boomer and you're judging today's drugs on past, it's not the case.
Correct. Yeah, and it's a totally different world. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to marijuana, super high concentration levels. You know what I mean?
THC.
Of THC. And that's kind of rewinding a little bit. That's when I do these presentations, I always ask people, has legalization of marijuana been a pro or a con, or how has it affected the communities? And you get a variety of answers, and there's really no right or wrong answer. But with that, when the state legalizes marijuana, that marijuana no longer comes from Mexico. So those marijuana fields get replaced with poppy fields, and the poppy fields is what produces heroin, right? So it's always something. Again, when the state legalizes that, it sets up another opportunity for cartels to bring in the next product. And like I said, we had a big spike in heroin. Then it started getting sprinkled with fentanyl, and now you have a huge fentanyl issue. Again, which kind of starts back when it's okay to grow your own and have the marijuana shops and do all that locally. Again, we've worked marijuana grows that were 18,000 plant grows, that are ruining water supplies, and they're just not clean, and they're not
Right.
done the right way.
Right.
So
Right.
again, back to the cartels, they're always going to find ways to make money.
Right.
And if the U.S. is going to allow you to grow marijuana, wonderful. We'll send guys there to grow some marijuana there. We'll replace our fields with poppy fields and continue producing
Yeah.
the next substance.
Yeah, I always get down to, like, why do we need to be so altered? I mean, we do it.
Yeah.
Alcohol. I mean, that's one of those fundamental questions that you can't answer. And
Right.
I know that a lot of people use. I mean, there's really a practical use for opioids for pain
Sure.
in moderation, and there's a practical use for medical marijuana. I get all that. I just wonder if it's confusing to kids, and I think the more we can help them understand the differences, and even in my day it was the Just Say No campaign, which
Sure.
evidently didn't work. We've had various attempts at trying to get kids to resist and just say no. We have to do better.
Right.
I think we owe it to our kids to do a better job. So if somebody wanted to learn more about fentanyl and opioids, you're so knowledgeable. I mean, we're running through, I think we hit on every drug, right? There's so much to know about this topic,
Yeah.
and locally, or I should say regionally, we have the opioid settlement funding, which has come down, and it'll come down for 19 years, the total of 19 years.
Sure.
It's already like 4 years in now. But that's continual funding. It gets lesser and lesser amounts, but that's an organization that is working to make sure the region has resources to
Right.
help. And before we give out your contact information, would you touch on Narcan just real quick? Because I want to put a plug in here for Narcan. We do have Narcan kiosks around
Yes.
the community.
Yeah.
It's free. It can save lives, and
Absolutely.
only in the case for opioid overdose.
Correct.
Could you speak about that
Yeah,
just a second?
yeah, absolutely. So Narcan is a great tool. I think you've nationally, although you're still seeing a lot of overdose deaths, I think that number would have been much higher if you didn't have Narcan. So my suggestion would be if you have, even if you don't think anybody's doing it, to have some Narcan in your house as a just in case is probably not a bad idea, considering, like I said, with powder fentanyl being a little more popular now. It's a great thing to have because you can, all it does is block the opioid receptors in the brain, and you can get your loved one back to a state of consciousness, as opposed to if you didn't have that, it may be pretty difficult to do that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because there's another thing that the public should understand is if you witness somebody in an active overdose, if you call 911, there's a statute, and it's 18-1711, and it's qualified immunity for anybody who reports a drug or alcohol overdose. That's going to help prevent people
Like
from
a Good Samaritan.
Yeah, you know what I
thing.
mean.
Okay.
So it's going to help prevent people dropping them off at the ER and then driving away.
Okay.
So if to anybody watching, if you experience that, you're completely covered. Law enforcement
So
is
don't
not
be
going to
afraid
show up.
to help.
Exactly.
And the Narcan is a nasal application.
Correct. Yep.
And it will have no effect whatsoever if they're not using opioids.
Correct.
So
Yep.
it better to try it and see if that works. So if
Yeah,
somebody
and it's better, like I said, better to have it on hand, and
Yep.
better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Right. So so in Montrose, and I think there's kiosks all over the region, and I'm speaking, Montrose Delta, Uray,
Yeah.
San Miguel, Hinsdale counties, and but we have one at the library. I think there's one at River Valley. There are a number of those. So that's something you could help people with if they wanted to call. So would you? I guess as a wrap,
Sure.
What would be your final message about this topic, and that you'd want all of us to know and appreciate?
The number one thing that I would ask, or that I would like to see, would just be more education. You know what I mean? I'd love for my phone to be ringing off the hook with people who want me to do a presentation to their church or to their organization, wherever that may be, because I don't feel like it's being talked about enough. Going back to what you said in regards to some of the drug programs in the past. I shouldn't say anytime. A lot of times when I bring up, hey, I do drug presentations, I talk to these kids like they're young adults. That's how they want to be talked to. I don't talk to them as kids. But whenever that gets brought up, I lost my train of thought. But
Well, I mean, so you said you were talking to kids like they're adults. I
Yeah.
mean, our kids are much more sophisticated than I was. I was kind of a goober in that junior high,
right.
right?
Well, and here's the thing about it is, again, I got where I was. So the DARE program, has taken a lot of heat over the years. You know what I mean? And what I do is not that. Again, it's just a simple conversation. The nuts and bolts of the drug world. What could happen to you? You know what I mean? If you see a loved one or somebody else, and all it is a conversation. You know what I mean? And that's what I think there needs to be more of. I want to see more parents curious, to be curious, just like the kids are curious. Because right now there's a lot of kids out there that probably have more information about the drug world and what's going on at the street level than the parents do.
Yeah.
And that's a bit alarming, you know.
Yeah.
So I would hope that parents would take that opportunity to kind of, like I said, reach out to me, send me an email. But that needs to be something that I think parents can work on is actually focusing in and seeing what some of the drug trends are and how it's affecting the younger generation.
And have a conversation with your kid, right?
Right.
You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be the corny, you know, how your parents want to go, we all got to have a chat. You know, I mean,
Right.
these kids are so bright at these young ages. You
Exactly.
just have a conversation about
Right.
it and help them understand.
When it kind of, you know, if you include them in the conversations and, like I said, talk to them as young adults, they're probably more willing to speak of that than, like you said, going about it a different way.
Or sneaking around looking at their purse
Right.
or whatever. Just, you know,
Just be open and honest,
Yeah.
and have an open conversation. You know,
Exactly.
because if you sugarcoat it, it's gonna, you know, it could take a turn.
Right.
You know, I mean, so if you address some of these major issues head on, then understand it's going to be a tough conversation. But if you don't have those conversations, you're allowing your child to gather whatever information that's not coming from you as a parent.
from unreliable sources.
Correct.
So, okay, somebody wants to hear more. They want to speak to you. They want to schedule a presentation. How do they contact you?
Yeah, you can reach me directly. My phone number is 970-252-7072, or you can reach me via email, and my email address is ghill@montrosecounty.net.
Right, and anytime. I mean, Greg does a great job doing a presentation, drilling it down to so that the kids and everybody can understand. Education is key. I totally agree with you. I think we need to do a better job of that.
Yeah.
And education is empowerment. And so once you know, then you can't ever go back. You're all in because now you understand the dangers and the problems that could happen to your kid or to a friend or your loved one.
Or yourself, yeah.
Or
you know,
yourself.
again, and like you said, going back to that 5-day dependency, it's not just for kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's an overall scope of anybody.
Sure.
But again, if you as a parent can identify what's normal for your child, and then start looking at things that aren't normal, it's going to help you put the pieces together a little bit quicker.
Okay. Well, thanks for giving us some tips on that. I learned a lot. Always learn a lot when I sit down and talk to you. But you know, my message to all of us is to be aware, eyes wide open. Make sure you know what's going on with your kid. Have a good connection with their kid, and get some Narcan.
Absolutely.
Have some
Yep.
Narcan. I think I have some on a key ring in my purse.
Yeah.
Just in case.
And I don't want to. I may be wrong here, but I believe the public health. Does public health have Narcan, or
Nah,
will we have that available?
I don't think we have that at our public health. I think that they distribute that out of River Valley,
Okay.
and I think Lyndall Young
Gotcha.
with AHEC, she's actually keeps those things filled up.
Okay,
So
perfect.
Greg can get you all that information. Want to thank you for tuning in. Hope this gives us all a little bit more information about some of the dangers of drugs in our community, and they are here. And want to make sure that you are able to touch base with Greg if you have any questions or if you want further information, we can make that happen. So, thanks for joining us on another episode of County Talk, and we'll see you next time around. So thank you, Greg.
Thank you.